Welcome into another Four Nations edition of Daily Faceoff Live, coming to you live from Boston and at Banner's Kitchen and Tap. Frank, they got us hooked up once again. It really is an absolute vibe in here.
Oh, man. You can't see it, but in front of us, 3 golf simulators, Tremendous bar, one of the largest screens in the Northeast behind us. It's like you could stack 4 Tylers and still not get to the top of it. So it's elite in here. Unbelievable place to watch a game. And if you're in Boston, come check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. 40-foot dream screen is what they call it. On top of that, Frank, they have over 60 different kinds of beer on tap. The food is unbelievable. We dug in yesterday after our show. Fantastic stuff. Lots of love to our friends at Banners Kitchen and Tap. Can't thank them enough for having us out this week. Frank, let's get into the show, though. It's brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. We're going to be joined by Josh Clipperton in a few minutes from the Canadian Press, Frank. But before that, let's kick things off with just kind of maybe going through the news around this tournament as we got through yesterday and into today. Some interesting developments on the Quinn Hughes front because everyone was saying he's en route to Boston.
Yeah. Oh,
then he's on the ice at Canucks practice?
Yeah, so this is an incredibly fluid situation. And even this morning, Bill Guerin, Team USA general manager, saying that they're still working through it to try and find a way to get Quinn Hughes to Boston to have him be available as the best option. Will it happen? I don't know. I mean, the rules are the rules, and that's what they were at the beginning of the tournament, and then they weren't, and then now they're back to being the rules again. So here's the bottom line. I don't think Quinn Hughes is getting on a plane to come here unless he's guaranteed to play or has a really good chance to play.
Yeah.
And right now, we don't know what the answer to that is yet. And the reason why I say it like that is because this is fluid, because the U.S. is also still dealing with other forward injuries. So you asked the question in yesterday's show, and I went to find the answer, which is what happens if the U.S. has forwards that are injured and they could, it's trending right now. Matthew Tkachuk and Austin Matthews both on the ice for practice this morning. Brady Tkachuk was not. What happens if the U.S. somehow is down to 11 forwards? Could they bring in Quinn Hughes and dress him as a 7th defenseman? In other words, is this rule position agnostic? It was written position agnostic. So I asked yesterday, what's the ruling? And the answer I got back from the NHL and NHLPA is we haven't made a ruling yet.
Oh, my God.
So I'm just telling you, this is very fluid. Quinn Hughes is going to remain in Vancouver today and practice again with the Canucks, more ice time, and then we'll see what happens. We're talking about a cross-continent flight, and we're talking about a guy that was banged up to begin with and wants to be ready for his team in Vancouver on the other end. So, in other words, gave you a lot of updates there. Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk and Matthews, Matthew and Matthews are looking pretty good for Thursday. Brady still not on the ice. We'll see.
The part that's just blowing my mind with all this is, again, they haven't made a ruling yet. The puck drops in 32 hours for this final. And
that was good math.
Yeah, it was. I can understand Quinn Hughes' perspective of like, hey, as much as I want to be on Team USA, I'm not going to fly across the continent, have to, again, sit in the press box.
He's not going to come here to eat popcorn and watch his brother play.
And then
that would be.
You have to be in Vegas, I think, Saturday for the Canucks to resume their season. Like, it would be a nightmare travel schedule for Quinn Hughes. At the same time,
do it for country.
Well, yeah, and at the same time, like, what if someone were to tweak something in warm-up? Like, the fact that the NHL is not just making an exception here after they kind of sort of made an exception for Team Canada. Like, again, proud Canadian, want to see Canada win tomorrow night. I'll be unapologetic about that. But just let Quinn Hughes play. Just say screw it. Just be like, you know what? Rules don't exist.
Well, that's just not how life works.
Know.
And so the other part of this, the other wrinkle that I don't know enough people have talked about, Quinn Hughes was already originally selected to the team. So there's kind of like hey, he was here, then he's not, then I don't know. It's been a mess. And here's the thing. I think deep down, the NHL wants to have truly the best players available on the ice because that's the best way to showcase the game. Mm-hmm. It's not to give the U.S. an advantage or give them a leg up. And the other part of this, too, is that, they want to be fair to the rest of the tournament, which is there were a ton of guys sick here. Neurovirus went through this tournament unlike anything that we've seen. Half of Sweden was sick. A huge chunk of Canada was sick. Like, they all played through it. And the NHL, in the end, wants to be sympathetic to the U.S. in this spot, but at the same time, there is a slate of rules.
And so again, hindsight being what it is, like Cale Makar was allowed to not play, be replaced, and then come back into the lineup. In hindsight, then what USA should have done is said Quinn Hughes is on the roster. And then before game one, they could have just gone, he's not healthy enough for game one. Jake Sanderson's been added. And then they would have had the flexibility to flip-flop in and out, right?
I guess.
Yeah,
but then
again,
you're still you're left with a limited number of players. So I don't know. It's
they should have just had bigger rosters on the jump.
Well, I was going to say that's, you know what, in the end, the NHL and NHLPA should wear this because they didn't get the roster rules right.
Yeah.
From the beginning. I can tell you with absolute certainty that the GMs from all four of these teams were pounding their fist on the table saying, we need 25. That's the number. And the NHLPA in particular pushed back on that because they wanted guys to have the right to go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
It stinks to come to a tournament like this, give up that time with your family, be away for 2 full weeks. You don't get a break. And by the way, you're the extra to the extra in the press box eating popcorn. That's not fun for anyone as much as it would be to get selected to the team.
Let's continue talking about this game, Frank, and zero in on Team USA. Yesterday, we talked about a couple of things for Canada, Marchand Marner, guys in the bottom 6. I'll start this conversation for Team USA. Zach Werenski has had an incredible tournament so far. There's a reason he's relatively high up on the MVP odds board over on Bet365. He has a chance to be an absolute game changer for me in this final. Again, no Charlie McAvoy. McAvoy was a guy, I know he got walked by McDavid on the one goal, but then he was hammering Connor McDavid, and he played really, really well in some tough matchups for Team USA. They might need Zach Werenski to play 28 minutes in this final, and he might have to be really good in those 28 minutes.
He's been really good this tournament.
Yeah.
So I would expect it to continue, and I'll take it a step further. He's been really good this season.
Oh, yeah.
Not for his career, but for this season alone, he's right there with Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. He's just, for me, like a small notch down. And that says something because we've never talked about Zach Werenski in that conversation. He's been a stout player for Columbus and obviously someone that you pay attention to league-wide. The other interesting part of this season has been that Zach Werenski wasn't on this Team USA team in the summer heading into it. He was a guy on the fringe. He was a guy that they were thinking about. But the way that he started this year and how well he's played for Columbus, he was undeniable. And a really cool moment for him was the Minnesota Wild happened to be in town about a week before the rosters were announced. I don't know if you remember the story, but Bill Guerin and his assistant GM, Chris Kelleher, who's working for Team USA at this tournament, ran into Zach Werenski and his wife at dinner the night before they were supposed to play each other. And Bill Guerin and Chris looked at each other and said, should we tell him now? And so Bill walked over to the table and he said, oh, yeah, dinner's on you. You got to pick up the tab. And Werenski's wife said, yeah, we will, as long as you put him on the team. And they said, actually, that's why we're here. We're here to tell you that you did make the team.
No kidding.
And so just a nice little moment. But for him, he's absolutely in that conversation and a huge part of Team USA's game plan on Thursday.
Yeah, and just quickly some numbers. NHL Edge put together a little thing I found really interesting. Canada's only goal in that game against the USA was the high danger attempt from Connor McDavid. Connor Hellebuck has not allowed a mid-range goal in this entire tournament. The goals,
you know why? Because he's seen them all.
And I was going to say, the blue line keeping everything to the outside and giving Connor Hellebuck a shot to just make the saves he's capable of. That's where I was going with it. Was if the USA can make Connor Hellebuck's life even just mildly simple, he will have a good game and they will win.
So you know where our seats were in the press box in Bell Center? We were literally right over the goal to the point where it's a gondola, and I'm going like this to try and see the net. But when I did that and got my fat self up against the desk to do so, it's a bird's eye view straight down. So you could see what the angle was like and the puck coming in. And every single time I was amazed at how clean it came to him and how much he could see. And so that's the recipe for Canada. If he can see it, he's going to stop it. And you've got to be able to block it and cut off, put some traffic there. For me, I'm going to zero in on Kyle Connor. He played the third fewest minutes of any forward last game. He's definitely shuffled down Mike Sullivan's lineup, and he's someone that I went into this tournament with way higher hopes for. I called him potentially one of the X factors, a guy that people really weren't talking a ton about. And he's had an unbelievable season for the Winnipeg Jets, but he's been super quiet in this tournament. And if the U.S. wants to compete with Canada, wants to make a statement. Yeah, you've got Jake Gensel, big game, big moment player, but it's time for someone like Kyle Connor to step up as well.
Kind of guy who can make a difference in one scoring chance. Like, give him one
That's all
look,
he needs.
and that's all he needs. We're going to continue the Four Nations conversation with Josh Clipperton in a few minutes, Frank, but I wanted to step away from the tournament and talk about a few different things today on the show. One of them being the quarter century team we threw together at Daily Faceoff, had a bunch of our staff and writers kind of submit their list of 25 players who could sort of define the last 25 years in the NHL. And maybe we'll start at the top. Crosby, Ovi, McDavid, Lidstrom, Patrick Kane as the top 5. Any qualms there in the top 5 or top 10 for you?
No. I mean, I had Leon Draisaitl way higher.
Really?
I had Nathan McKinnon way higher. Like, it's hard to... The hardest part for me in sending in my team was balancing out the very beginning of the quarter century with the last part of it. And obviously there's recency bias, but like, then you look back and you're like, Nick Lidstrom, 5 Norris trophies in the beginning of the quarter century. Like, no one's going to be arguing with him at number 4 there.
There was one guy I had a bit of a problem with being too low, and it was Pavel Datsyuk. I just think, again, he won 3 Selkes, 2 Stanley Cups. Points per game, he's 29th in the last 25 years. So, like, that is pretty low. The regular season production maybe wasn't there. But when you want to talk about players who kind of defined a generation, like Datsyuk, the moves, the beginning with the shootouts and all of that, like, I felt like Datsyuk, honestly, I would have had him above Stamkos. I might have had him above Matthews. I might have had him above Patrice Bergeron, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys that I think were too high. Like, if you're telling me who is the more impactful player in the quarter century, Chris Pronger, Hart Trophy and Norris Trophy winner, or Patrice Bergeron, as many Selkes as you can get, 1 Stanley Cup. Chris Pronger played in how many Stanley Cup finals during that stretch? Like, and how many teams did he help drive there? Jaromir Jagr, I would have had lower. He was in the low 20s on my ballot because he spent 3 prime years in Russia. Then when he came back, obviously he was an impactful player after that, but he was like 40 years old by then. And it just wasn't the same. So the superpower for Jaromir Jagr was like 1992 to 2000, not 2000 to 2008 before he left. But nonetheless, also some interesting choices with some goalies too. Vasilevsky makes the cut. He didn't for me, but you know, that's why you vote.
Yeah. You can read the full piece up at dailyfaceoff.com, Frank.
Shout out to Paul Paduti for putting the graphics in that piece, which I think just really enhanced it.
Yeah. Man, it is crazy to think when we get back to doing our show next Monday in our normal stomping grounds, we're going to be like 10 or 11 days away from the trade deadline. Like, it is going to hit us in the face right away. So with that in mind, I wanted to do a little deadline reset. Today we'll focus on the East. Tomorrow we'll focus on the West. A couple of teams I maybe want to hit on, but let's start at the top. The Washington Capitals. How all in are the Washington Capitals going to be?
I have real questions about that. For one, they've had some serious chemistry with their team. I think they'll make a move, but I think the beauty of the Caps is that they're able to kind of continue to reload on the fly. And they've got some prospects and a depth that they could trade a pick from, and it wouldn't hurt them. So I'd imagine that would be the case. I still think they need a 3rd-line center. They went out and got Lars Eller, not enough. So that's the position I would circle, which is why I had someone like Scott Lawton going to them in our trade deadline matchmaker article. I just think Washington is really well positioned, and in a wide open Eastern Conference, why not them? I just don't think that as much as they want to compete with Alex Ovechkin there, that they're going to go way over the top in trying to do it, because it's only 1 year ago that no one was really taking them seriously and they were still kind of coming out of rebuild mode. I doubt that this is the moment where you just go nuclear and throw everything on the table.
I would like to see him maybe add a little bit more on the wings too. Like, I mean, there's a lot of guys there I like, but maybe you just add a little bit more scoring punch to that bottom 6 and you feel good.
This is a year that almost everyone on the Caps is having a career year. It's a very Seattle Kraken-ish year from last year. Okay. Or a couple years ago. I don't know that you want to go wild.
The other one I want to talk about before we get to our big segment for the day is the Carolina Hurricanes. They're going to get back, and they only have a handful of games to make what could be a pretty big decision on Mikko Rantanen. Is that getting overblown, or do you think there's actually a conversation happening there?
No, I think there's a conversation happening, but it's squarely between Mikko Rantanen's agent and the Carolina Hurricanes. I believe they're trying to extend him. I think conversations have obviously gotten deeper over the course of this Four Nations break. And the big decision that they have to make is watching Rantanen at this tournament, watching his production over the last number of games since he joined the team. is it enough to justify in such a short sample size paying him a massive number? Is he the right fit? That's the question I'd be asking if I'm Carolina. Obviously, a huge, heavy dose of recency bias there. And I think if you actually go back and look at the internal numbers, Mikko Rantanen's expected goals since he's arrived in Carolina is better than it was in Colorado. Does that blow your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And maybe with a stat like that, you can attribute it to like, okay, is he carrying the puck a little bit more? Nate and Makar aren't carrying. Like, maybe there's something
but
there.
Then you see Natchez and then the success that he's instantly had, and you go like, well, how much of that is just the McKinnon effect? And is there a McKinnon effect that exists for Rantanen? So
yeah,
all fair questions to ask. I just think we just don't know enough yet to really make a judgment one way or the other.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Next week, we're going to be swimming in the deep end when it comes to trade deadline talk. Figured we should at least dip our toes in a little bit first and feel out the water. Tomorrow, like I said, we'll talk about the Western Conference. But for now, let's get back to the Four Nations Faceoff and get to our big segment for the day. It's brought to you by our friends at Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country. Through Charm and their sister brands, you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks through Charm and their Masterpiece program, and it all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy. To check out their large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds and mined diamonds, you can check them out online at charmdiamondcenters.com. Very excited to be joined here in our studio up in the golf simulators by Josh Clipperton from the Canadian Press. And Josh, I guess where I want to start with this, you've been in the room talking with the players. I thought Brandon Hagel's comments yesterday were very interesting. When this game gets going tomorrow, do you think we're going to see the same level of spiciness we saw on Saturday, or do you think it's died down a little bit?
I'd be surprised if we saw 3 fights in 9 seconds, but I don't think there's going to be any less intensity. This is a huge game for both these teams. As we know, there's a lot going on off the ice with our politicians. The casual fans in both countries are really starting to pay attention. People that aren't even fans are starting to pay attention. So this means a lot. Sam Bennett yesterday said, like, he was asked, how does this compare to this Game 7 of Stanley Cup final? And I was surprised by his answer. That he said it's really, really close, the feeling in this room. So it'll be a good one.
Josh, what do you think the psyche is of Team Canada? Obviously, they're confident and they know they can play better, but at the same time, there's probably a little egg on their face. Like, they got quite literally punched in the face on Saturday a couple times and then lost, and were only able to put up 1 goal. What do you think their confidence level is?
I think it should be high. I mean, as we know, like, they didn't have Cale Makar, and now, of course, the Americans don't have Charlie McAvoy, so there's a huge flip in that situation. I mean, they need to get more to the middle of the ice with Connor Hellebuck. They didn't make his life difficult enough. They have more to give. I think that they've been sort of sifting through their line combinations. I think that Hagel, Seravalli, Marner line gives them more balance, sort of in the back end of the lineup. In terms of how their psyche is, I mean, I would be confident if I were them, but at the same time, you're coming into a difficult building. They're going to be the underdogs. They're going to be like the crowd is going to be against them at least. I guess they're a slight underdog depending on where you look, but it's going to be a really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how they start the game, because like, the emotion has to be there, but I don't think we're going to see people punching each other in the face 3 times in 9 seconds.
I wouldn't bet against it though. That's the funny thing, because what happens if the Canadian anthem is booed? I'm saying don't do that if you're an American fan. First off, a respect thing, and Canada hasn't done anything wrong here. But beyond that, as a retaliation, I'm guessing you probably see it. But does that mean if Canada gets booed that they have to treat it the same way? Do the Canadian players have to treat it the same way?
Good question. The Kachuk brothers said after the game that didn't have an impact. Now, we can have to take them at their word, but I'm not sure that I fully believe that.
I don't. They were incensed after the first game.
Fair enough. No, if the Canadians, I mean, the way that Brandon Hagel we talked about yesterday, it's not about the cameras, it's not about the flag. And they were asked, do we have to initiate? Do we have to be the ones, the aggressors? He says, no, we'll just react. This is what we do. We don't need to show how tough we are, whether that's their mindset, at least, in the sense that they don't feel like they have to do that. But I'm sure they're willing to do it if it does. And you know, as you say, Frank, there's a chance the anthem gets booed. If it does, and Sam Bennett's on the starting line, who knows?
I have to ask the goaltending question. Jordan Binnington. Speaking of confidence, there's probably no one more confident or have more self-belief than Jordan Binnington. There's been some shaky moments, some tough goals, but at the end, he's given Canada a chance to win every game that he's played. Would you change it up, or if it was you personally, or would you stick with him?
I think I would have changed it up maybe last game, but at this point, I think you have to keep going. And like, he's made the saves. He has swum around his crease a little bit. He's looked awkward. I thought it was interesting when John Cooper referenced his movement of the puck. I think that's maybe a real reason that he's in the lineup. That they like the fact that he can be a one-man breakout the same way that Cale Makar is a one-man breakout. Aiden Hill probably I'd give him the edge in terms of maybe the actual goaltending part, but this seems like an important point to hit on for the team of moving the puck up quickly to the forwards, and I think that might be the reason. Now, that said, if things go bad in the first period, I would have a very short leash on this guy. I mean, he has not impressed, if we're being completely honest. He's made enough saves, but he has not made the ones he's not supposed to make, and goalies have to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, in a standard NHL game, if you play the way he did against the USA on Saturday, where like he made 3 big saves in that third period to keep it a 1-goal game, and the goals weren't terrible. The Gensel one I didn't love, but then you sit there and go, it's best on best. You're going against Connor Hellebuck. You need to be A+. That's the bar here.
Yeah, well, one of my colleagues said if Carey Price plays that game, Canada wins 1-0. and that's the reality of it. They don't have Carey Price. They don't have Roberto Luongo. They don't have the pedigree they've had before. So they're going with what they have. And we know who's not here: the Logan Thompsons, the Mackenzie Blackwoods. The decision had to be made a month earlier than the management wanted to. Those are the rules, and these are the guys they have. And the GM is, of course, Jordan Binnington's GM. I'm sure that plays into it. But John Cooper's been unwavering. They said it wasn't a tough decision to go back to him, so they're going to go back to him again.
So with that in mind, if they have Carey Price, they win the game 1-0. Canada can't play that way. They can't be the 2014 Sochi team or the 2016 World Cup of Hockey team where it's like, hey, we'll win this game 2-0, no problem. Do you want to see a little bit more urgency in the attack from Canada here? They probably have to find a way to score 4 goals to win this game.
Absolutely, they need more urgency. As I mentioned earlier, they need to get more into the middle of the ice. And it's a cliche in today's game of getting to the dirty areas, what have you. But they absolutely need more. I think that they're still figuring out the lines, but the same for everybody. Everyone's figuring things out as they go here. When this will be the 4th game, and this is it. And they're still moving guys around. The Americans are moving guys around today at their skate a little bit. Part of that's injury related with Brady not being on the ice, but it'll be really interesting to see how they come out, because, like you say, they can't grind out 2-0. You can't trust Jordan Binnington to allow 2 goals.
And they shouldn't have to. This is a vaunted Canadian attack. If you can throw Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, and Connor McDavid on the ice together, having just 1 goal, I don't care if it's Ken Dryden in net from 1972. You have to get pucks past Connor Hellebuck, and that's it. Anything short of that, a 1-goal effort again, is just not good enough.
And they have to get to his eyes, and that's what they did against the Finns. Better the McDavid goal doesn't go in without Mark Stone in front. We know how great a season he's having with Winnipeg. I mean, he's at or near the top of a lot of hard ballots at this point, mine included, the way he's played. So you have to make his life difficult, and maybe that includes bumping guys. I mean, these are NHL rules. You can get away with stuff that you can't get in regular national hockey. So I think they need to do whatever it takes, and skill, yes, but also maybe mucking it up a little bit as well.
Let me ask you, since you said the words Hart Trophy, let's talk about the MVP of this tournament here, right? When you look at the odds boards, McDavid and Hellebuck are the 2 guys at the top. Do you think it's as simple as hey, if the USA wins, Connor Hellebuck's the MVP? If Canada wins, more likely than not, it's McDavid? Or is there someone maybe lower down there going, hey, with a good game, they have a case?
I mean, if Sidney Crosby has a big game in the final, then I think that he's just as deserving as anybody else. I mean, in a 4-game tournament, how can you really – if someone has a big game in the final, they're the MVP. It could be someone who has a hat trick. You never know, right? I agree with McDavid and Hellebuck. I mean, they've obviously been the focal points for both their teams so far. But at the end of the day, this comes down to this 1 game. Yes, if it's just an even game, one or the other wins, but it could be anybody on the board, to be honest. If you can take anybody, the field, I would take the field.
I just saw how juicy they were yesterday on Bet365. Matthew and Brady Tkachuk are 12 and 14 to 1. If one of those guys has a 2-goal game and the U.S. wins, what they've meant setting the tone, what they meant in the first game of the tournament, how do you not how would they not be in the mix?
Exactly. That's my point. These guys they've been dominant in their role, and if guys have a big game, those guys are other players in that realm that have.
Let's get a field bet. We need a field bet.
Exactly. You need the field bet. I think if you get a 10-1 field bet or whatever the number is, I would take that. But I mean, the safe bet is obviously McDavid or Hellebuck, just because of how they played. But I mean, if you want to roll the dice, I'll go longer odds.
All right, can't let you go without your prediction. What do you think happens tomorrow night?
Well, this is my unbiased opinion. I know I'm Canadian, but I've seen this happen so many times. A team wins in one building and then comes back and wins the other building. I predicted 3-1 on Saturday night over beers with some of the guys in the bar. Just the flipping of the score. I think Binnington has a good game, and we didn't know about McAvoy at the time. I think it's a huge loss. Makar coming in is a huge gain.
And what if Quinn Hughes is in?
And what,
that's
that's true. We don't know. This is a moving target. We'll have to see what happens. But I just the same way that I predicted the U.S. to win on Saturday night, I predict Canada to win on Thursday.
Josh, can't thank you enough for popping by in person here. Thanks for doing this, man.
Happy to do it anytime, guys.
There you go. There, Josh Clipperton from the Canadian Press. We're going to continue along with the show and get to our inbox question. It's brought to you by our friends at JP Wiser's, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL and also the official whiskey of game night. So tomorrow, if you're a Canadian hockey fan and you're sitting down to watch one of the most anticipated games of the last decade, why not have a glass of JP Wiser's with you? JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And Frank, as we go to our hashtag Ask DFO question, we got one in the chat here. We always got Rangers fans buzzing around.
Well, hold on. Before we do that,
Okay.
I just want to give a couple updates from downstairs at TD Garden here. Just some updates from the media. Quinn Hughes said that Jack Hughes said that he's been texting his brother Quinn, obviously keeping close tabs on it. He said, I know it's an interesting situation for sure. And the other part of that, Team Canada, and frankly, when Team Canada made their roster moves, they were the other three countries, the US, Finland, and Sweden, they weren't part of the discussion. But Pierre LeBrun reporting that Team Canada has no issue if Quinn Hughes joins the US. So no complaints if you were wondering about that from that perspective. Not that they were asked or brought into it, but it's not like they're meeting a roadblock here. I think everyone understands best on best truly means best on best, but there were a set of rules that were, again, established at the start of the tournament. So, man, the fact that, as you said, we're 32 hours away from game time and this is all still hanging in the air, and it's not just with anyone. This is with a Hart Trophy candidate, one of the best players in the world that you could potentially add to your lineup if you get there. Man, the drama just keeps getting better and better.
I remember when we were doing our show from the What KL studio, and I was like, Frank, what are we going to talk about for 3 shows? It's flown by, and I'm sitting here going, oh, yeah, I already know what we need to talk about tomorrow. Like, there's still stuff that we really haven't dug into. So, again, the 2 days off did end up paying off here for the NHL.
It's actually just allowed this like slow build and burn to it that I was thinking from a team perspective, and I actually asked Mike Sullivan about this after the game on Monday. Like, what do you do with an extra day to think about it? But he was saying some of our guys are so banged up, the extra day of rest is really going to be good.
Yeah. Again, the extra day of rest, the injuries, like I feel like maybe we haven't even talked enough about how important health is of a factor. Canada's
Brady
much
Tkachuk not out
much
there
healthier
again
team
after crashing into the post.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's Sidney Crosby still not at 100% with his wrist injury. Like, it's a whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be something. Again, plenty of headlines for us and storylines, I should say, for us to go through tomorrow. Let's get to our daily bets for our friends at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, we kind of touched on the MVP thing with our guy Josh Clipperton, but here are the odds, the updated odds, and you're right, Matthew 16-1, 18-1 for Brady.
Tasty. I'm just telling you, just a little sprinkle a little dust on there. I mean, you don't have to go crazy, but $25 that could wet your whistle.
It could pay for a lot of drinks if that were to hit. Let me set a couple over-unders for you. 1.5 fights in this hockey game. Would you take the over or the under? Really? You think some Canadian players maybe have, or players on either side?
I just don't know how they don't respond,
yeah.
Especially knowing the eyeballs and attention. Again, if it's booed, how do you not? It's like almost like stepping up for the honor of your country.
Yeah. If I were to give you plus 500 on Jordan Binnington getting pulled, would you take it?
No.
How high would it have to be?
He'd have to let in 3 in the first period.
Yeah, I do think that's kind of the only path. Again,
like, you're not throwing in a guy who has now sat here for 2 weeks watching in an absolute pressure cooker unless you get shelled.
Unless it is, desperation time. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. Frank, new episode of Frankly Speaking dropping. Take me through it, and then we'll do a little sneak peek.
Yeah, USA Hockey Executive Director Pat Kelleher. Great conversation with him, wide-ranging on all things future of USA Hockey. So, yeah, we did touch on 4 nations and what this means, this exact moment in time for USA Hockey. Take a listen. We've been building to this for a while, and everyone's kind of been waiting for this moment when the scales tip of, international hockey supremacy so much as it can. Canada's been the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to going toe-to-toe, and everyone's excited to see it. How does USA Hockey as a whole internalize that?
We got to win at this point. Like, we get it, and I'm the first in line for it. And John Van Biesbroek, who, as you know, runs all of our international programs, John's about winning, right? Like, we've done a great job, grassroots development, all that. Obviously, on the women's side, what we do on the para sled hockey side, we're winning at those highest levels. We're winning World Juniors. We're winning U18s on the men's side. The top-level men's competition, we haven't won since 1996, and that's not acceptable for any of us. And with all that we have and all that we do, there is pressure internally in the organization. There's pressure on the players. There's pressure on the coaches, but it's healthy pressure. It's good because they want to win. Like, they didn't show up hoping to have a great tournament and have some fun with their buddies. They're here to win this thing, and they know it can be done the right way with a great culture, supportive of each other, and doing their best for USA.
I think that's the message here. It's time. Second place, that's not an accomplishment anymore. It might have been in Salt Lake City or in Vancouver, but being since 1996 that they've won a top-level men's competition, the U.S. has to make a statement. They have to break through and win. They're no different than any of the other NHL teams that we constantly harp on that get in the mix, and then don't get over the top. You've reached another championship game. You've won an important game on Canadian soil, but you've got to deliver. That wasn't the only facet of our conversation. We talked a lot about the changing NCAA landscape and how the U.S. is not going to allow more teams in the CHL to play on U.S. soil. We talked about the future of the National Team Development Program. And one cool thing from my point of view, the U.S. is going to establish what's called a National Developmental League, NDL, and it's going to be above Tier 1 hockey. So if you're a 14 or 15-year-old or 16 or 17-year-old, two different age brackets, they're going to start a new 40-team league that I say is bringing sanity back to hockey. One of the things they're talking about is for these players, guaranteed 1 weekend a month off, controlling travel, no more 5-game weekends, capping tuition. And it's just an interesting thought process to just get a view into how USA Hockey is thinking about doing things. They've been at the forefront with the American Development Model, ADM. It's ran circles, frankly, around Hockey Canada. And now moving forward, what's next?
Interesting stuff. You can find Frankly Speaking wherever you get your podcast from, or right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. That's a wrap for us from Banner's Kitchen and Tap here just outside TD Garden in Boston. Another big shout out to them for having us. We'll be right back here tomorrow when it's finally game day, and I cannot wait. Everybody in the YouTube, thank you so much. For our producer, Pat Puff, Frank Seravalli, I'm Tyler Yaremchuck. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Eastern. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you like that video, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube, because we have tons of great content, from exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick to instant analysis and breaking news with our Daily Faceoff insider, Frank Seravalli, on Daily Faceoff Live, to your go-to morning duo, Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn, on Morning Cup of Hockey. Plenty of great content, wall-to-wall, team-to-team, all the way across the entire league. And you won't miss it if you subscribe.